Hello and welcome to another episode of Hear the Cannons. I am your host, Colin Hallboom, back after a brief hiatus due to some family stuff I had going on, but I'm really excited to be back and joined by two of my co-hosts, two of my fellow co-workers over at BucsGameday, which is Sports Illustrated's only website dedicated specifically to covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Of course, I'm talking about none other than JC Allen and River Wells. If you watch the show, you already know these gentlemen very well. And if you haven't read their work, make sure you head over to BucsGameday.com, where we're covering everything to do with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the NFL all season long. We are credentialed. We are in the building, and we're giving you all the takes you need to stay dialed in on your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. While you're at it, make sure you are liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications on YouTube. We're growing real fast, and we hope you join us for the ride. And now, gentlemen, how are we doing? JC, I'm going to pick your brain real quick because I know you've been a really busy guy, and River, you're always busy editing all of our work while putting out all your articles at the same time. So you guys are crushing it. But before we get into any of that, I just want to take a moment to offer my condolences, our condolences to the Kiffin family on the passing of Monte Kiffin. Obviously, an absolute legend, one of the most important figures in the history of this franchise, really. And he was a guy who, if you followed the team, obviously you were very familiar with him. He's an architect, not just in terms of the Buccaneers defense, especially in the early 2000s. That was one of the greatest groups of all time. But throughout the NFL, he changed the game. You know, the Tampa 2 was emulated and followed for years, still is to this day even. So shout out to Monte Kiffin. Rest in peace, Monte Kiffin. I don't know if either of you gentlemen care to weigh in or you want to just keep rolling from there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the architect of the Tampa 2, whether you're a Bucs fan or not, you kind of know who he is. Obviously I was fortunate enough to be there for his Ring of Honor induction when it was announced at the Bucs facility. Got to spend a little one-on-one time with him, spoke to his wife, amazing people. And obviously, it's always tough and heartbreaking when you have a loss like that. I was there at the game for his Ring of Honor induction. And while I'm not, a Bucs fan by nature, when you meet someone and you connect with someone and they're a genuine person, it's always sad to see them go.
And, talking about meeting and connecting with people, just hearing from the John Lynches, the Derek Brooks, those guys who are so synonymous with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization, they speak so highly of Monte Kiffin, and that tells you the kind of person he was, how beloved he was around the league, and he will be missed, not just here in Tampa, but throughout the football world and throughout the real world as well. So thank you for everything you did for this community, Monte Kiffin. And, now, JC, the host of the Sixth Podcast.
His name and he appears.
Yeah, Pirate Parlay's host. You just had you had an okay guest, get on the show today. Who'd you have on the show? And
we had Todd Bowles on, obviously head coach of your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was awesome, man. It was early in the morning. He's up early, he's going, he's moving, but it was awesome. He was really down to earth, kind of, you always expect coaches to kind of give you some coach speak, but he kind of went into detail on some certain things. I asked him kind of about the culture, the chemistry, his coaching style, developing game plans, some great stuff from there. Asked him about, obviously, some news. We got training camp right around the corner. Asked him about Randy Gregory. Still hasn't spoke to him yet, which is kind of crazy. If you ask me, you skip all of OTAs, you skip mini camp. And then you don't reach out to the head coach to be like, hey, coach, I'm sorry I was having something. No, nothing. So he's going to be surprised as us if he shows up on Tuesday, I guess, or on Wednesday when veterans report. So ask him about Tristan. I think it's still a status quo. I think like all of us, he kind of hopes that Tristan will be out there. It's very important for him to be out there. I wrote an article about it last week, why it's so important for him to be out there with a new line, new running mate next to him at left guard, potentially new center, so you have half the line, 2/5 of the line that's going to be new guys on there potentially. So, but kind of status quo, wait and see. Hopefully things, shake out. Keith update. We'll see how he's progressing. Kind of when that comes around. Looks like Zach Anick said might be good to go, the undrafted quarterback that they brought in. But got his opinion on some of these battles. Some of you, he called the outside linebacker one of the biggest battles is probably going to happen in camp, and one he's looking forward to. And then, as always on my guests, I try to kind of do some rapid fire questions, some favorites, some this or that, and kind of peel back, just a football guy, make him seem a little bit more relatable to, us and stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun. We got into some fun questions like that, but it was a great show. Super excited to have him on. I have Liam Cohen coming on tomorrow. So that's another awesome guest I'm excited for, and we'll have players trickle in on there. We'll have players on here as well. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. Like, subscribe, turn on reminders. It's a Pirate Parlay on the Sick Podcast Network. So appreciative for his opportunity and his time to come today, and look forward to chopping up with more guests in the future.
Big battle in the outside linebacker room. I guess that makes sense when you are lacking bona fide studs in that position group. Maybe something, a little teaser for what might come up here during today's topic of conversation, which of course is evaluating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' strongest and weakest units, at least at this point of the offseason, heading into 2024. But I mean, for the most part, the roster is set. I mean, there'll be some tinkering, of course, and roster decisions and such, but we do have a pretty clear indication of what this team's going to look like. And I mean, let's start with the strengths, first of all, because this team still has plenty of strengths, no question about it. And every team has strengths and weaknesses. So important to preface it with that. But biggest strength on this roster, this one is interesting, and it's certainly debatable. I'm going to throw to you first, River. What do you think is this team's biggest strength in terms of the position groups? River's muted.
Unmute yourself.
Yeah, River's muted there.
Technical difficulties.
All right, JC, you're going to steal the lead here then. And if you steal Rivers, that's his fault for being muted, or our producer in the back. JC, what do you think is the Bucs' strongest position group?
I think it's when you look at it, there's certain levels, right? You got guys you got depth and you got starters. I think safety is a pretty strong group with Jordan Whitehead back there. Obviously, Antoine Winfield's the best safety in the game. You pair him with Jordan Whitehead, who has improved his game as well, his coverage skills. You kind of look towards who's behind him, and they're cross-training Christian Izien, who played that position in college. They got Tyke Smith there, who played that position as well in college, kind of bounced back as that safety sort of nickel guy. They got Kayvon Merriweather, who started 2 games last year, who I'm really high on. And then there's some guys who are making some splashes, too, in training minicamp and OTAs, and a Rashad Wisdom and a Marcus Banks. So I think that's one of the strongest groups. Kind of when you look at the depth there, look at the players at the top. There's other groups I think that are strong on the roster, but then kind of have questionable depth behind them. So I think when you look at that position, I think if Antoine goes down or Jordan goes down, heaven forbid, I feel like you feel comfortable with Izien stepping in for a game or two, or Tyke or Kayvon Merriweather, and we'll see what more that Rashad Wisdom and Banks can do, and they can push their way on the roster as well. But I think they have a pretty good group right there, and I think when I look at the secondary, what they want to accomplish with depth, with veteran leadership, with young players, I think at the safety group, that checks one of my boxes off right there as one of the strongest position groups on the team.
And, in the olden days, someone might have rolled their eyes and be like, oh, great, safety is our best position. Like, that's not important. Well, this is a different NFL these days, and safety has become a very versatile, impactful position, as indicated by the contract just given to Antoine Winfield Jr.
Especially in Bulls defense.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And all those guys' versatility will play a big role for sure. So that was well stated, JC. Tough to argue with that. River, did you lose your chance to come out and identify the safeties as the Buccaneers' biggest strength, or do you have a different group for us? Let us know.
I did. I was going to say safety, and there we go. We can talk about wide receiver, though, I suppose, since that was brought up in the comments here on the YouTube channel. And you do have, obviously, Mike Evans being a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL, and then you have Chris Godwin, who gonna have a really good year this year, hopefully. Did some really good stuff last year, especially towards the end of games and crunch time, but maybe need to get in the end zone a little bit more and be a little bit more productive. And perhaps with Liam Cohen bringing him back to the slot, that'll be a possibility. And if he can get back to the Chris Godwin that we've seen from him in past years, then that lethal duo is back and you're cooking. And obviously got guys like Jalen McMillan, unknown at this point because he's a rookie, but promising there, and Trey Palmer, who has some stuff to work on, but showed some flashes of some really nice stuff last year too. So overall, maybe if you want to call it top heavy or not, that's your prerogative. But I think there's some good potential there outside of Evans and Godwin too. So I do think it's a strong group, because if you got Evans and Godwin in the same field at the same time, then your third wide receiver can be a number of different guys, and that's still a really strong group. So hard to argue against wide receiver being pretty strong.
Yeah,
I think people are not prepared for the Chris Godwin we're going to see this year. I sense a rejuvenation from Chris Godwin. I really do. That injury was serious, and just because he's such a beast and he got back on the field so quickly and was ready to contribute and did contribute so quickly doesn't mean he was at his best yet. He was continuing pretty much to rehab while he's been playing these.
It takes time. Yeah.
It takes a lot of time, and I think he's a guy, fantasy wise, but real life wise, especially, who is going to remind Buccaneers fans why they are so lucky to have him and why they have one of the better receiving groups in the league. So I'm glad you brought
a receptions monster.
100%.
100, at least 100, 112, 115 receptions. I think he's going to have this year if he can stay healthy.
For sure. Now, the interesting thing is the wide receiver position is stacked for a lot of teams in the NFL. And it kind of, like I'm thinking of even in the NFC South, I mean, you got some real pass catchers over in Atlanta. The Saints, you got Olave, who's a real problem, but with the slant boy vacating the relevant discussions, I mean, that's not such a concern. And Carolina is clearly not on that level. But in terms NFL wide, I mean, you got teams like the Bengals, the Texans now, the Eagles, Bears. The Dolphins, Bears, right? A little unproven. Well, no, fair enough. Keenan Allen and DJ Moore aren't unproven.
Roman Dudesay is going to be a dog too. So
yeah, no doubt. And then sorry, go on.
No, I was going to think, you're mentioning these teams that have like three legit wide receivers, right? That you can look at and say, okay, but look behind them. When you look behind them, it starts to unfold the curtain that the depth isn't as strong there as I think the Bucs have. Now, the Bucs have an unproven at number 3 with Trey Palmer or Jalen McMillan, who are the combination of the two. But I think Raheem Jarrett, which is still a little unproven, but you saw him progress towards the season before he got injured. I think he can be a real player. You got guys like Sterling Shepard
too.
Yeah, exactly. In minicamp too. Guys like Sterling Shepard, who if he can find his legs underneath him and kind of be a potential contributor, and they always find a guy, right? You look at Scotty Millers of the world, Devin Tompkins of the world. This year could be Cameron Johnson. So when you look at teams who have like 3 guys potentially fighting for their number 3 spot, and then 7 guys fighting for 6 roster spots who can all make an impact, I think that puts the Bucs in a good situation, top heavy as they may be, as River alluded to, with those 2 guys who are bona fide studs. I think the depth they have brings up the rest of the room, even if it's not veteran depth, even if it's just young depth with potential that has, that could lift the whole floor of the room up, behind Mike Evans and Chris Godwin.
For someone who's not a Bucs fan, self-proclaimed, that smells like a little home cooking to me, though, JC. I gotta say, because yes, okay, but we're talking Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan, Rock Jarrett. I agree with you. First of all, that those are all solid depth guys. But I mean, I feel like maybe we just aren't as familiar with some of these back end receivers on some of these teams who are rolling 3 deep with like elite talent at 2 to 3 spots.
I can only trust my eyes though. So when I'm out there and I see these guys doing things at camp and stuff like that, we are. But again, you are right too. It's overreaction season too. I can go back to Jalen Darden 2 years ago, who his get off was reminiscent of Antonio Brown's. And he was a talk like, oh, if he could be. But I think what I've seen with my eyes and what I hear from the coaches and from some of the guys who I trust on the team, they're excited about those guys. And I've seen some flashes in camp and stuff like that. So why shouldn't I kind of get excited about what those guys could be too? if I'm, seeing it with my eyes, hearing it from inside. So, yeah, I mean, it could be a little homerism as a reporter for the Bucs, not a fan, but you're also kind of develop these relationships with these guys. You want to see them succeed, so maybe that's part of it. But I think they've got a good group of potential guys that can make some noise.
Fair. I like that. And yeah, man, that's totally reasonable. I mean, you are literally, your eye test is a little stronger for a team you get to see the ins and outs of and hear the details from the people who see them, behind closed doors too. So if Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan or Raheem Jarrett or Sterling Shepard pop this year, then all of a sudden you're talking about some really great depth. You're right. So something to keep an eye on for sure.
Mike and Chris goes down, they're screwed. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Let's not get anything twisted. They've got good depth to make plays and have guys circle in and out. If Mike's down, you're screwed. You're
for
screwed.
Sure. Mike, maybe he'll get a hammy issue at some point, but he'll miss a quarter and he'll be all right. That's just what Mike does.
You gotta hope that's all he misses, because if not, this season's down the drain. Knock on wood. If anyone's got wood in there, I'm knock on wood right now.
Yeah, there's some other position groups that I think are more vulnerable to an injury, unfortunately on the team that don't have the depth that they do at receiver. But while we're on the strengths still, this is you guys stole the big ones. I think it's pretty clear. It's wide receiver, safety, however you slice it. Winfield and Whitehead being reunited, both of those guys are much improved despite playing really well together a few years ago. So I'm super excited to see what those guys bring to the table. And then you had already mentioned, Tyke Smith and some of the other guys who have the ability, Christian Izien, to slide back there if needed. We just talked about receiver. The offensive line as a whole, it's like two different beasts within it. But if you're the tackle group, I'm very fond of. And I think Luke Gedeke is likely the most underrated player on the team potentially. And then Tristan Wirfs, of course, is Tristan Wirfs. I mean, not much more to say there. But you can't really judge it because an entire offensive line unit is as good as its weakest link. I've said it before. I'll say it again. So
I think you mentioned one of those spots where if you get an injury, you're screwed. I think you just named it, man. I get you have two strengths right there with two of top 25 tackles in the league, I think, and one of them is top 3 in my opinion.
Might not be 3 either. Yeah.
Justin School, Silas Gianzi, Brandon Walton having to play for an extended period of time. I feel a little bit more comfortable with School because he was in Shanahan's offense in San Francisco back in the day and has had some starts. I think 12 career starts under his belt, but still that is a drop off from Tristan Wirfs to Justin School. So I think if you want to talk about top heavy, that's a top heavy position because the players behind it. I think the Bucs need to invest in a mid-round pick next year and tackle and to have that guy to develop because they need a surefire swing option if something happens to one of these guys, especially if they're going to lock up Wirfs and then think about locking up Gedeke. You need a guy under a 4-year deal. If one goes down, right now, if it's an extended period of time, I'm freaking out. If it's a game or two, I think you can get by with School. But that's a very shallow position in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
River, am I reaching here if I think that the interior defensive line is worthy of mention here? If you're just talking primarily about that Vea Cansey tandem and what I'm expecting from them this year, and then you got some vets behind them and some solid guys. What are your thoughts on that group?
Are you a mind reader, Colin? You can tell me. I was going to bring that up, actually. And obviously, when you have Vea and Cansey together, that can be a very dominant group right there up front. Good depth there, like we talked about. Golston, veteran presence there, who could really do some good work in rotation. Greg Gaines, who has done some good work himself in that role as well. So that's definitely a strong group. As far as Cansey goes, we know that Cansey has done some really good work in the pass rush, especially after coming back from injury, he's done some really good work. Him developing as a run defender, I think, is not only something I'm excited to see, but is necessary going forward. That's definitely something he's got to work on, and I'm excited to see if he can really take that next step there. But I think he had 6.5 sacks, including playoffs last year, Cansey. He was up games.
Up there in tackles for loss as well.
Yeah, so impressive in that respect. And if he can only get better in year 2, as most rookies, especially defensive linemen, tend to do, because that's a really tough position to get used to playing once you jump into the NFL. So if Kancey can get even better from there, and you have Vita Vea being Vita Vea, who, for all the talk of when he needs to take that extra step up, he's still ridiculously dominant in games. So pairing those two together, that's going to be pretty impressive if they can both get it going.
Vea has such a high floor. Vea has such a high floor as a player, like just based on his size and power and athleticism and all that. And then just the one thing I want to say before I let JC chime in here is I thought, like, we knew Kancey was going to be, or expected him to be, potentially a liability against the run. Like that was his scouting report, right? He's a pass rush specialist from the interior. I thought he actually showed some real signs against the run at points. So I do expect him to improve in that area. And I was honestly pleasantly surprised by what he did there, River. So I guess the jury's still out on that part of his game for sure, but I'm hoping the arrow's pointing up, like you mentioned. JC, sorry I cut you off. What do you have to say, my dude?
No, I think you talk about tackle, defensive tackle, offensive tackle, to me, are the same thing. I think you're really top heavy there. I trust the depth behind them, but you got to think Kalijah Kancey missed all of training camp and pretty much 3.5 games his rookie year.
Yeah,
Vayer's only played 16 games twice in his six-year career with the Buccaneers. So, I get he's slimmed down. Try to make sure that
slim down Vita Vea.
Yeah, those nagging injuries don't come back. Those calves, those knees, those foot injuries and stuff like that. Remember the Super Bowl year? He was taken out for almost the entire season. He only came back in the playoffs
just in time.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you look at it, you got some top heaviness right there. Greg Gaines performed admirably when he stepped in, but it was only for 2 games last season. And then Will Golson, he's more that defensive end, I guess, than a defensive tackle. You can kick inside in some things. And Joe Tryon-Shoyinka could play the 3-tech if you want. He did it his rookie year. He did it a little bit last year. But the depth behind them, and it becomes a question mark too. So who do they keep? Do they keep 5 guys with the roster construction? Do they keep 6 guys? And if they do keep 6 guys like they did last year, is it Mike Green, who really hasn't shown much? He got 2 starts last year, but was injured the rest of the season. Is it a guy like Judge Culpepper, legacy guy? Is it a guy like Ernest Brown, who played with the Rams the last 2 years at defensive tackle? Not too many starts under his belt. I think 6. You got Lual Uguak from Montreal Alouettes in CFL. You got
don't butcher a Canadian's name, man.
Well, you tell me how to say his name then, bro.
It was a valiant attempt.
It was more of a defensive. Both of those guys are more defensive end types. So like the depth behind them scares me a little bit. But you talk about 2 dogs. I think it becomes stronger. The floor is lifted because of the 2 guys at the top. But behind them, if you have anything long-term injuries, you're still kind of like biting your nails, like, oh my God, how are we going to get through this?
For sure. That's true. But those 2 guys at the top, man, that Vea and Kancey, there's something about that duo that I like. I like how different they are. Like, I like how complementary their skills and abilities can be to one another. So if Todd Bowles can get the most out of them, they'll really make some noise here, and hopefully have some assistance on the outside in terms of rushing the quarterback. So speaking of that, I want to talk about the biggest weaknesses on the roster. And River, we threw to you the biggest strengths, but could you please enlighten us with your opinion on what do you think what position group on the 2024 Tampa Bay Buccaneers is the weakest in your opinion?
Good question. There's 2 I have in mind. I'm sure we'll hear about the other one, but I'll start with edge rusher / outside linebacker / whatever you want to call it. Yaya Diaby is looking to start in his second year, and he had 7.5 sacks last year, and that was very impressive. But outside of him, and he's also still a guy going into his second year with a little bit to improve on. Played some really good football last year, but obviously, there's still steps to take. Outside of him, you have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who there's been a lot of discourse on JTS, obviously. We talked about it a lot, but definitely some room for improvement there, despite a few things he does well. And then Anthony Nelson, who's done some decent work in rotation. And then you've got Randy Gregory, who still hasn't shown up yet. And then you've got some unproven guys like Marquise Watts and Jose Ramirez, who have done some really good work on practice squads and in rotation as well. But in year 2 can get some more playing time. So I think along with Braswell, I forgot to mention Braswell. Braswell could turn out to be very, very good, and the Bucs will hope he will in the second round, but still got to take a look at that. I think with this edge rushing group, there's the potential there kind of for a lot of young players to click at the same time, and that would be awesome. But at the same time, or on the reverse side of the coin, that might not happen. And if that's the case, in Diaby's your 7.5 sack guy, and there's not a lot else going on there, that's a pretty weak group. So hopefully Braswell can inject that sort of energy that they need into that group, but definitely one to watch as far as starters and depth and how far down that goes.
You're right. There's quite a pendulum opportunity here with this group, River. It could, if JTS pops and Braswell comes out with his hair on fire, like all of a sudden they're looking like they've got some real juice there. I like that you brought up Yaya Diaby in a very calculated, diplomatic fashion, because I worry that folks in Tampa are all of a sudden expecting him to be, like, I don't know, 13.5 to 17 sacks next year or something ridiculous. Like that's just not well. Hey, I'm not saying it. I'm just saying I can tell that the crew is expecting maybe a bit too much from this guy who came in and caught some people off guard, but he's not exactly the most nuanced pass rusher.
Sure.
He's a big, strong boy and he has a motor and we love that. But, year two, guys like that kind of get figured out a little bit. I don't want to say, but
pass rushing moves for Diaby in particular, I think I'd like to see him expand his repertoire in his bag a little bit, because he's already, obviously, he looks like an action figure. He's super built, very fast, like JC just said. All the physical tools you could possibly want, but I would love to see him kind of open up his technical game a little bit. I think he really could be dominant, but again, like you said, it's year 2. So
now, Bud Cannabis on YouTube saying he hopes Watts makes the roster. Is that like a no doubter, JC, or why don't you weigh in on that before you chime in on the discussion?
Yeah, I think Watts has a really good shot at making the roster. Talked to Bowles a little bit about him this season. I think when you look at it, you got about 7 guys going from 5 to 6 spots. Again, I'll beat the dead horse. It's all about roster construction and where they want those bodies. Do they feel like they need tight end body, linebacker bodies on kickoff and stuff like that, or do they feel like they're good with speedier guys? So it all depends on that. But I think at least there's 5 spots. He made it last year. I think he's in competition with Gregory, Jose Ramirez for one of those final spots. I think eventually they keep 6, and I think 2 of those guys make it. Obviously, one guy hasn't showed up yet, so we'll figure that out. But to the point of weakest, I have a hard time saying this Bucs offense outside linebacker group is the weakest position on the team. Do they have a true premier number 1 pass rusher? No. Do they need one? Absolutely. And I think if you put one across from Diaby, now you're dealing with some damage. But Diaby, again, a lot of the times just, he didn't have everything down last year either. He was flying by the seat of his pants. It's very difficult. Bowles, and he's mentioned it today on my podcast, the defense is really hard to get. It's not a simple defense. It's very complex. And now that he has a full grasp and a full feel of it, he's obviously been putting the work in. He's mad he can't work out on Sundays at the facility. I think he's going to come back and with a better understanding of the defense, I think he's going to, I'd say, hover around 9-10 sacks. I don't think he's going 13-17. I think he can be a big provider. I think the depth, though, is what intrigues me. And again, do they have a premier guy? No. But I think when you look at the depth of Joe Tryon-Shrinka, who has consistently put up 30 pressures, last 2 seasons had 5 sacks. First season was kind of an anomaly because he was being played under JTS and in 3 technique and in places where it kind of wasn't great for him to showcase his ability. He's also the best coverage linebacker on the team, and he's also the best run setter on the team too. So sometimes those responsibilities are things that Bowles was like, we play him at inside linebacker, we play him at safety. I'm like, I don't remember seeing him at safety, but I'll have to go back and look now. But I think with him, Marquise, Jose Ramirez, Randy for whatever he can give you, and then Chris Braswell, obviously, I think they have a solid core there to build from them, and there's definitely potential there. So I wouldn't say it's one of the weakest. I would say there's a lot of question marks there, but I think if one of those guys steps up to the occasion, or they can use a rotational at that other spot across from Diaby, I think they're in a good spot. You got to remember too, because of Bowles' tendency to blitz, quarterbacks were getting the football out way quicker last year against the Bucs than they were other teams. And, even Shaq Barrett was talking about that last year. He's saying, we don't have time to get there. We don't have time to finish because the ball's already out. So, if they can do some things and the cornerbacks can step up a little bit, I think they would be a lot better at getting the quarterback and finishing.
Speaking of the cornerbacks, I think you can't discuss weaknesses on this team without mentioning the outside corner position. Now, slow your roll, folks. Don't burn me at the stake quite yet. Okay, I'm a big fan of Jamel Dean. I have been for a long time. I'm very happy he is our starting corner and assuming our CB1 position. And we had Zion McCollum on this podcast. He was fantastic. I really like Zion. I identified him as a potential breakout player for this team this year. I know you did in a separate piece, JC. That was on SI National, part of like a 32-team publication that went out just the other day. But what I'm saying is, and you've been talking about it all night already, and that's depth. And if there's ever a position that you need quality depth at, it is cornerback. And I have serious concerns about the depth. We know Jamel Dean is in and out of the lineup. Same problems with Carlton. Zion McCollum has an awful lot to prove. Okay, he's checked a lot of boxes, but how many of those boxes have been on the field, right? He's been mismatched, forced into a role predicated on versatility, which he did well as the reserve for Carlton and Jamel because it was so rare that those two were on the field together. But like, am I wrong here, or is this not potentially at least needs to be discussed as the biggest weakness on the team? River.
I'll go first.
Is it me? Is it me?
River. I didn't see anyone. I'm saying River now.
I'll go.
My pause. Go, because I won't stop talking. You know that.
No, that's good. No, I think you're correct. And Jamel Dean, I'm also a big fan of. I think when he plays his best football, he plays really good football. Obviously, got a little bit hurt last year. But if he's healthy, that will be a huge boon for the Bucs going forward because he can play really good man coverage, play some good zone coverage too. I am not as big of a fan of Zion McCollum as some others. Is kind of in the spirit, but I think as a CB2, he can play some good football in Todd Bowles' system, which he's known for a little bit now. He's gotten used to, and he had more starting reps last year in lieu of the injuries to Carlton and Jamel Dean, which seemed to alternate every time one came back. The other one seemed to get hurt last year. But yeah, no, you're right. Outside of that, you've got a lot of question marks, a lot of some veteranish guys like Bryce Hall and Tavierre Thomas, who, Tavierre Thomas played some good corner or nickel corner a few years ago, but hasn't quite done that in a little bit.
He's Bryce strictly Hall, inside too. He's not.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Bryce Hall did some good stuff in New York, had a little bit of a rougher camp.
Torched a mini camp.
Yeah, so not great there. Definitely, if you want to talk about top heavy, you have Jamel Dean, and then at least in my opinion, a lot of question marks going forward from there. So that's definitely a worry. I think trading Carlton Davis was the right move given the need to get some other players and given his injury history. But sitting right here, right now, looking at the corner depth in the room, you think, man, that probably would have been nice to have a second corner like that there. Yeah. So. Interesting to see how that's going to go going forward, but I think you're right. CB is definitely something that you got to watch going forward.
Yeah, and that pick proved to be pretty valuable. Like the Bucs may have got themselves a starter with that pick that was acquired in that Carlton Davis deal. Right. But as Bud Cannabis mentions on YouTube, watching us, which by the way, folks, make sure you're checking us out on YouTube, right? Like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, so we can get those comments in here and comment on your comments live and get those takes out in the stratosphere. But he's what Bud said was, as cold as CD3's hands were, hard shoes to fill, and that's totally the truth.
Hands.
Honestly, kind of unbelievable stone hands at some points.
Very
too.
Bad.
Like he would have you're like, surely he'll catch this one. And
Jamel's just as bad though. I mean, Jamel's just as bad. That's
that Lions.
That Lions Zion had
first quarter
14 interceptions in college. You're looking like hopefully he can be the guy, right? But
yeah,
we're not gonna be Dean.
Yeah, I mean, what quarterbacks was he facing at Sam Houston State though, right? Like, so anyway though, that River, I'm not pleased with you for bringing up that Jamel Dean dropped interception in the end zone of that divisional round game. That haunts me. We had a great angle of that from the
We
press
did.
box there. Oh
We
my
did.
gosh, man. I feel like I could write a whole piece about that.
Gotta bring out that jugs machine at some point, you know. Gotta just start going.
He does. He's out there every practice.
Yo,
No, but
like,
I agree with River though. I think, and I agree with you, Colin. I think that this room is one that when Jamel Dean is on and he's healthy, he was the best press man coverage corner in all of football in 2022. Like he can be very good. He's got the speed to keep up with guys. He's got the physicality. He's physical and run support, perhaps too physical. That's where most of his injuries come from, is being too physical and run support. But I think he can be a easy top 20 cornerback in the league when he's healthy. As far as Zion, big shoes to fill, but I think he proved that he could handle it enough. Now, a week in, week out basis where teams are prepping for you consistently. Let's see how that comes. But one thing that really jumped out to me, Colin, when he was on the podcast was how he said that he's learning how to use his speed as a tool and a weapon instead of relying on it. And I think if he can do that, I think that's going to put him in a better situation to make plays. And obviously he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got all the intangibles, one of the highest ranked grad scores out of any cornerback. But the depth behind, you're scared because you got Bryce Hall, you've got Tyreek Thunderberg, who's looked good. You got Josh Hayes, who's traditionally a nickel guy, who's moving back onto the outside. You got Keenan Isaac, who didn't really do anything last year either. And that's kind of it. Andrew Hayes is another undrafted guy who was at a tryout player who they signed. Like you got Bryce Hall, who's got some experience, and after that, you're just like, okay, what's going on here? So, it's nerve-wracking to think if Jamel goes down and Bryce Hall doesn't kind of turn around his struggles from minicamp, what kind of position they're in if there's a long-term injury.
Like you mentioned it, though, JC, Todd Bowles' defense is very hard to pick up, and I think a lot of people have said that coming into it. So hopefully that's just something, and combination of the heat coming from New York to Tampa Bay, and then Todd Bowles' defense is probably a nice 1-2 punch for any would-be corner coming from up north. So maybe he'll be able to turn that around going into the season, or maybe not, but we'll see.
I mean, I got no doubt with Todd's ability to get guys ready to play, though. I mean, think about it. D. Delaney, Richard Sherman in a week. Like some of the older guys, other guys that they've brought in over the past couple of years when they have injuries, especially the Tom Brady years, they had quick turnarounds, like getting guys ready to play who probably shouldn't be playing at all. And they filled in admirably enough because of the simulated pressure and the pressures that they're putting on. And Bowles can cook up his scheme where it puts a little less on them, and they'll go to more, zone coverage and stuff and kind of hide some deficiencies, which ultimately, as we saw last year, takes away from what Carlton does best, what Jamel does best. But I can think you can get some guys to play. It's just like, ooh.
Yeah, but on YouTube says interesting to see who fills that CB2 role. I mean, we know who's going to fill that CB2 role, and that's the guy we're talking about, Zion McCollum. And
for sure,
JC mentioned that 5-letter word that starts with an S, speed, and that is something that not like we're talking about Zion speed and his RAS scores. Let's not forget Jamel Dean can fly as well.
4.33.
So you putting those two guys out on the field, you got some serious speed on the outside. But again, it comes back to that depth, and hopefully Zion, from talking to him on this show, which JC, I like that point you brought up when he was talking about his speed. He just was so mature, and it seemed like he had a new perspective. Like it was just quiet confidence about him. One of the most impressive interviews, I think. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, go back, check out our interview with Zion McCollum. He was fantastic. But I believe it will truly open your eyes to like the maturity and intelligence he has, and how it just was palpable that he feels like he has really grasped this Todd Bowles defense and he's ready to let it go. Maybe that's why Rivers so not high. He wasn't here for that episode. So, maybe he would be more like,
maybe he just hasn't hung out with Bud Cannabis. So that's why he's not that high.
But yeah, we're going to, at least, if cornerback is the biggest weakness, at least we were kind of unanimous, I think, with
I don't think it's the biggest weakness.
Well, one of them. Okay. One of them. Okay.
I think it is one of them, but I don't think it's the biggest weakness.
Okay. But my point was going to be, Mr. Allen, is that it's good to have your strongest group being the safety group then, at least, right? Because there's defensive backs. So at least they can depend on those guys on the back end, ask a little bit more out of them, which we know Todd Bowles does for pretty much every position on that side of the ball, asks a lot out of them. What do you think is the biggest?
I would think nickelback is one of the strongest too. Nickel with Izzy and Tyke Smith and Tavier Thomas. I think that's Josh Hayes being able to. That's a starting position in this defense for the most part. So I think that's a very strong. Plus Antoine Winfield can play there if you need him. If Kalen Deloach can play that big nickel type deal. So I think they've got a lot really good depth at nickel. But my weakest position is tight end, easy. You know, I think Cade Otton's great. I think he's descended into a top 15 tight end in the league. He needs to work on his blocking still. I mean, look at the tight ends, River. There's really not many tight ends in the league. I mean,
no, yeah, but
okay. Count the top 10 tight ends, and like you're reaching for like Evan Ingram and stuff like
50.
that.
I'd have to go. Once we get off this podcast, I'm gonna go
through it. Check it right now. Check the tight ends on all 32 teams. He's around top 50. And I mean 15, like he's middle of the pack, 15, maybe 16. But I think he's good. Blocking really improved towards the end of the season. Definitely needs to work on that more. Hopefully that was an emphasis this offseason. Justin Peel coming in, former tight end, former player, more known for his blocking. Hopefully that helps him. But behind them, Payne Durham is a complete question mark. And I loved what Payne did towards the end of the season. But remember, he was inactive for the first like 4 or 5 games of the year. Made some spectacular catches. Obviously a huge red zone threat at Purdue. But can that carry over this year? I know Jason Light was on one of the podcasts and said that he's one of the guys he's most looking forward to seeing this season. But Colt Keith has proved that he's not a threat in the receiving. He's got 2 touchdowns. Sure, he's got like 2 catches though. That's it. You remember the first game of the season, he was thrown to twice right out the gate. We're like, wow, he's throwing the season with 2 passes to Colt Keith. And, you know, his blocking, everyone says he's a blocking tight end, but, you know, his blocking has been slightly above average. It hasn't been anything to, like, really write home about. His bread and butter has come on special teams. David Wells started the year as the number 2 tight end, quickly fell off into the practice squad. Tanner Tallis had a really good camp, River, but I don't know if you're counting on him to be the guy. You know, I think he's one of these really good practice squad players that you have on your team for a few years and does great on scout team and provides that. And then the ultimate wild card is Devin Culp, you know, inconsistent in college, but has great, measurables with his size and his speed, fastest tight end at the combine. Makes the spectacular catches, but drops the easy ones. Not much of a blocker, more of that move tight end. He does better pass blocking, especially in space. But he's not going to be a mover on the line in the run game or anything like that. So there's so many question marks right there. I think there's a good battle for that 3rd spot with Keith and Culp, and then potentially they keep both of them because it's like I said, roster construction. I'm going to keep saying it, people. Roster construction. Do they want those tight end bodies on there who can block and disengage and stuff like that, or do they, you know? So it's going to come down to that. But I think that's probably, to me, the weakest spot because I have more faith in Bryce Hall going in. I have more faith in, you know, someone else stepping in a cornerback for a game or 2 than I do if it's Payne Durham, Colt Keith, and Devin Culp stepping in to take over that tight end. And I know you can erase the tight end and kind of manufacture it different ways, and you got the receivers to do so, go more 4 wide and stuff like that. But I think that's, if you lose Otten, you lose a lot on your offense, and there's no one to replace it.
You're bang on. There's really no debating that. I think in terms of how much we are relying on a guy JC considers a top 15 right on that verge tight end, and River shrugged his eyebrows at that one. He shrugged his shoulders a little bit, so it's debatable. Charlie Johnson on YouTube during JC's tight end rant said, no, it was good though. He brought up good points. Said no faith in Devin Culp. JC went on to answer that, and I mean, I gotta say, Charlie, this guy's a 7th round pick who had like 30 catches in his collegiate career, so like you can't be expecting him to do something, right? Like if he makes the team, that's awesome, but you can't be looking for him to contribute. I just don't think that's a realistic thing. So I don't think it's a matter of no faith in him. I think it's just, you know, we got to see it before it's more of a flyer at that point, right? So
I agree. Yeah.
The other position, and since I highlighted the tackles earlier, it's kind of a cheeky way to do it because they're part of the offensive line, but the interior offensive line, is it a weakness? We'll soon find out. But it needs to be identified as a serious cause for concern because you got Cody Mock going into year 2. He looked okay at points and he struggled at points playing at starting right guard position. 1st round pick, of course, is Graham Barton, and everyone's expecting him to be an all-pro by the bye week. Right? There's going to be an adjustment there as
it is what week 10 could happen.
As impressive as he's been.
Yeah.
as impressive as he's been, and my expectations personally are very high for Graham Barton. There's going to be an adjustment period there, and you don't know what you're going to get yet. He hasn't played an NFL game, and then we don't even know who's starting at left guard yet, right? You got Sua Opeta, Ben Bredesen, Robert Hainsey. Is he just a backup center, or is he going to get looks there? Like, we don't even know at this point. So I have serious concerns about the offensive line as a whole, and it's all because of the interior. And the question marks that exist there. So, River, thoughts, agreement?
I think you're right to be concerned for sure. I think Barton definitely has high expectations going in. All pros very high, obviously, but he looked really, really good in college. Played center there as well. So not like he's jumping into anything super new. So that could be a big bolster. Mock looked a little rough to start the season, had a pretty big upturn towards the middle of the season and then went back down a little bit again. But we've talked about how hard it can be for some of these positions to get adjusted to. So Mock definitely could.
Left to right too.
Right. So Mock definitely could make a jump in year 2 and end up being a really solid player. And the Bucs will be hoping for that. Yeah, bigger too. So the Bucs will be hoping for that. But looking at how it happened in year 1, there's a possibility something happens there. And then at left guard, it's Bredesen or Opeta, one of which doesn't have a lot of experience in Opeta, and the other is Bredesen, who's played a lot all over the place, as I believe we talked about in another pod. Not the greatest, production there, but a veteran nonetheless. So it seems like a lot of these position groups we're talking about have sort of a high and a low, path to go down. If Bredesen or Opeta clicks and Mock takes that job in year 2 and Barton comes out the gate, then you could be really solid there. But if none of those things happen, then you kind of end up with a similar-ish problem to last year. Maybe not quite as bad, but similar problem. So that's definitely a contender. I have hope that some of the things will go right on that interior line, but we have to wait and see, which is kind of how we have to end everything because training camp hasn't started yet. But it'll be interesting to see. For sure, especially how good Barton is right out of the gate. If Mock can take that jump he needs to take, and if that left guard position can be average, and then you have Mock taking a big step and Barton playing really well, kind of not necessarily right out the gate, but in his first season, I think that could be a pretty decent interior line and good enough to work with. So
it can be better than last year. JC, what are your thoughts on the interior portion of this offensive line, man? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so I kind of feel the same as River there. I think when you look at the group as a whole, someone needs to emerge out of that left guard. I still maintain that Robert Hainsey and Barton at left guard give you the best combination on the line. We'll maintain that. But if they feel that, Bredesen or Sua is the better guy, the thing I'm saying, Hainsey, Opeta, Graham Barton, Bredesen, that right there, Brandon Walton, the depth to me is really something to highlight. I think they have a lot of depth at guard and center. I think, Ben Bredesen can play center. I think if you have an injury on the interior, you're probably protected the most out of most of the positions on the group. I think even if it's adequate play, I think it's better than what you got out of Filer and Aaron Stinney last year. And I think Tristan Wirfs on the left side is going to help cover up any deficiencies that maybe Bredesen he can't do it all himself, but we're talking about Tristan Wirfs, like he could take on and help out a little bit there on that left side. And he's going to draw attention anyways, as it is, which could, kind of give some guys a little bit easier matchups. But the Bucs had a plan, and it started towards the middle of the season when they started talking about it, is to get bigger on the interior. And they accomplished that with guys like Bredesen, guys like Opeta, guys like Graham Barton. They feel like if they can get bigger, they can hold up more in the run game. They can hold up more in the pass game. And with Mock getting bigger, another year comfortable at their right guard position after making the move from left tackle, I think they're in a good position. But again, it's like it's all got to click, right? If it doesn't click, chemistry along the offensive line is the most important position to have chemistry with. I would even say beyond wide receiver and quarterback, because if you don't have chemistry there, that's where everything starts, and it all falls apart there too. So it's it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, how quickly they go to naming their starting five, because we went into training camp with their starting five named. So how quickly Barton can prove that he can beat Hainsey, how quickly Bredesen or Opeta win that left guard spot, so they can kind of go in cohesively through the rest of training camp and the preseason games with their five offensive linemen set.
Yeah, I like you talking about Robert Hainsey, because I'm with you in that I'm surprised he hasn't received more consideration to switch back to left guard. It seems like they want him. Yeah, I know, but he's proven to be an adequate starter at times. Like,
at center, though, when he played tackle in college, he's not big enough, strong enough to hold up as guard.
Yeah, but like, I don't know.
Either wins it or he's a backup. He's like,
you gotta be pretty strong at center too. But what I'm getting at is that he provides valuable depth for that group, which is what you highlighted. So I think that was an important point to make. But anyway, on that note, folks, I think we're gonna get on up out of here. I want to thank everyone who chimed in on the comments.
One of my strongest positions. We didn't even talk about running back.
Yeah,
I think running back's a strong position, man. They got Rashad White. Chase Edmonds, when healthy, provided a burst, and we're seeing him in camp. And then Bucky Irving. I think they've got a really strong group there at running back, especially with the new system that's coming through, the offensive line. If it can click the way they want and the way that the offense is going to be set up, with Baker being able to switch into better runs or better situations, they'll be in better situations. Yeah, I mean, you kind of look at what the Rams have done. Kyron Williams came out of nowhere. You look at Todd Gurley in the past and some of these other rushers, Cam Akers and stuff like that, stuff he could do even when he was banged up. I think they got a really good shot at having a really good run game this year. I'm not talking like top 10, but, from anything's an improvement, obviously. But I think they can be around the middle of the pack, 15, 16. I think they've got a good running game this season, good running room this season.
Well, and a lot of that will come back to that interior offensive line that we just discussed, right? Those two go hand in hand. Like, they're going to need to pave the way, and they're going to need stability in front of those guys if they are going to come anywhere close to reaching their ceiling. Because as we've learned over the past couple of years, with instability up front, doesn't matter how good your running backs are individually. The Bucs have had an abysmal rushing attack, right? So, but we'll see what Liam Cohen can do to kind of alter that. I know that's going to be a priority of his, and Cohen's philosophy will also impact the tight end room. We talked about a lack of depth there. He likes to have three receivers on the field more often. So there's that element of it as well. So things will be different than next year. Hopefully the running back production is much improved.
Might as well talk about inside linebacker too. It's the last position left. Take it away, River.
What was that?
He wants you to talk inside linebacker.
Yeah, Colin Rivers. Talk about it. I mean,
I think inside linebacker comes down to how KJ Britt plays in this coming year, and I think he'll play well because he did last year. He's been in the system, and I think Levante still has that touch that he needs to have. Obviously, the physical differences are quite, they're showing a little bit, but he's still always in the right place. He's still making incredible plays, even down to last year in the NFC divisional round against the Lions. There were plays I saw him make that could have been massive, big chunk gain saving, if not touchdown saving plays. So he's still there. And I think that's going to be a good position. You have Servassier Dennis there too, who could do a little bit kind of in training camp, might go a little bit ahead with KJ Britt, but I would expect KJ Britt to take that one. And I think that's going to be a really good sort of competition against each other, even if Britt's probably going to win, because then Servassier will get some good reps there. So excited for that one. I think as long as you have Levante David there, it's going to be a strong group. And that's kind of the nature of how inside linebacker works as a position group as well, kind of how you can have a guy like that kind of make up for the deficiencies around him, and Levante has in the past. So I think that's going to be a good one, and I am pretty excited about KJ Britt. I think he can come out and play. So
yeah, Todd called him today. He named him the starter actually on my podcast today over on Pirate Parlay. Go check it out if you haven't. But he said he was a starter and said he's pretty much his eyes and ears on the field. So high praise for KJ. So just because he doesn't have the speed as Levante, nobody does. Doesn't mean he's not a good football player. Called him a thumper. So kind of maybe those 2 down. Maybe we'll see if he can progress to that 3 down. But said he's got plenty of packages for Servassier too. So I think the competition behind him with J.J. Russell and obviously our our founder's homeboy, Kalen Deloach over there is going to be a fun one to watch. And I feel good about this position group. I think JJ Russell gave you a good game when he was asked to start. I thought Savasia gave you a good game when he was asked to start. Another year in the system, another year, with that experience in the belt. I think outside linebacker, I wouldn't call it strong, but I would call it one that I'm not worried about, which I was earlier in this offseason, if that's weird to say.
No,
well, yeah. The depth helps. I mean, they are going to be like, we saw KJ Britt, like the big critiques of KJ Britt were like, he's more of like a thumper, run supporter, can't defend the pass. Well, after watching 5th overall pick Devin White defend the pass for the past, four seasons, I think we all understood at that point that he can't be much worse than that. So, and as River said, you got Levante David. Any position group with a player the caliber of Levante David is going to be in okay shape. Yeah. And he could actually have a really big year. Like, he could really take off. You know what I mean? He's always, I love Levante David, man. I don't know how you couldn't. Anyone who covers this team, watches this
Who doesn't? Yeah.
All time. Improved Cansey in a faster, slimmed down Vea, wreaking havoc in the backfield and doing what he can do as a run defender still. Yeah, I mean, Levante might have a lot of. It was funny. Levante Vea was on Bo Allen's podcast the other day. We got an article up about it at BucsGameday. Go check it out. But he was talking about Levante and was like, Levante's so good, man. But sometimes, like, I feel really good about a play and I'm like, get in the backfield and then I'll just feel someone scream by me. It's Levante. It's like, I want to cheer. I'm happy for him, but I took my tackle for loss.
I'm sure there's a lot of that going on when it comes to.
We got 17 last year, so it's great.
Let's get him an all-pro. Let's get him a first-team all-pro, man. Let's just do it.
Gotta make it happen.
Okay, well, now that JC is satisfied, I hope we are now gonna get out of here. So again, thanks to everyone who joined us on YouTube. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Helps us out a great deal. We're trying to grow this thing, and
that was me. That was all my hands.
That wasn't me. That wasn't me.
Okay. All right, folks. So get me out of here. Okay. Thanks for joining. Make sure you tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. and we'll have another exhilarating discussion on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed talking strengths and weaknesses. We get a little debate going, but we need your help in the comments to really fuel that discussion. So until next week, thanks for tuning in. Go Bucs. Rest in peace, Monte Kiffin.
Peace.